So.
My back pain got so bad it was tough to get out of bed. I tried a lot of pain relievers, but they all quit too soon. I even asked my doctor about surgery. Thankfully, my daughter told me about Aleve. And now pain can't get in the way of the things I love to do.
Aleve can stop pain all day with just 2 pills. That would take 8 Tylenol.
I wanted everyone to see just how grateful I am. Thanks, Aleve.
What if an internet provider asked you to draw from your imagination to envision taking your internet experience from everyday to extraordinary? You'd create AT&T WorldNet Service Plus. First, you'd start with the fastest logons and better connections. Then you'd add all the latest features, like instant messaging and chat for real-time communication. Not to mention cutting-edge tools like video email, so people can see and hear you every time you send a message. And you'd want live customer support. Now you can get it all from the provider-rated Best ISP by PC World. Call now for AT&T WorldNet Service Plus at just $16.95 a month. That's nearly 30% less than the leading ISP. So call 1-800-WorldNet today and switch to the internet plan that's drawing lots of attention.
We now return to Family Tree, here on the History Channel. In Africa, a name is powerful. And African names speak volumes, often representing parents' hopes and dreams for their children. Kalfani in Swahili, a boy, destined to rule. Akanke in Yoruba, a girl. To meet her is to love her. A name can also provide specific information about the child.
The person's named after the day of the week in which they're born. So you have lots of people who are named Monday or Tuesday or Friday, and that's where the Friday in Robinson Crusoe comes from.
Tribal names are considered sacred, steeped in faith and superstition. They are even thought to follow an individual into the afterlife.
Name of a deceased person can't be uttered ever after the person dies. If a person dies and then someone uses the name, you're essentially sort of almost calling the person back from the dead.
During slavery in America between the 17th and 19th centuries, Southern plantation owners used names as weapons. They dealt humiliating blows by renaming slaves after themselves, or using classical names like Venus, Caesar, and Pompey. But many slaves held on to their African names quietly, the way they preserved their cultural heritage, not by the written word, but by oral tradition, passing their stories down from generation to generation. For African Americans, it is sometimes the only way to trace their families through this period. Oral tradition helped preserve one of the most remarkable slave genealogies of all time. The 1976 book, Roots, by Alex Haley. Based on the oral history passed down to him by his grandmother, Roots traces Haley's genealogy back to the African Kunta Kinte.
It was sold as nonfiction, as a proven genealogy of one man who was not a professional genealogist, who took a great interest in his family history and traced his family all the way back to the original slave and his country and place of origin in Africa, which had never been done before by even professional genealogists.
The book sparked a genealogy craze among all Americans. The number of genealogical societies across the nation doubled, going from about 500 to over 1,000. But for African Americans whose ancestry passes through slavery, genealogies continue to be very hard to follow or prove through written records.
Slaves were kept illiterate. They were not capable of writing down and recording in Bibles, as many people did. Slave families were broken up on the plantation. Children were sold off. Names were changed.
Without written evidence as a second source, genealogists have often questioned the veracity of oral histories. Even Alex Haley's Roots was criticized by professional genealogists for what they considered a lack of documented proof. This was the situation with the famous Hemings-Jefferson case. Since his first term as president in 1801, Thomas Jefferson was accused of fathering a mixed-race child with his slave, Sally Hemings. The allegation was never proven. But in 1998, descendants of Hemings, whose oral history supported the claim, came forward with surprising results from a DNA test.
When they tested the descendants of the Hemings family and compared that with the Jefferson family, and the DNA came up as a match, then that was kind of the last bit of evidence that was required.
A combination of scientific proof, historical documents, and oral history finally swayed the general public into accepting the Hemings-Jefferson story. In a similar case, the descendants of freed slave West Ford claimed their ancestor was the illegitimate son of George Washington. Their controversial claim would pit the Fords' oral history against Washington historians' arsenal of journals, letters, slave lists, and wills.
My grandmother, Catherine Ford Saunders, was the one that told us that West Ford was George Washington's son. She told us that when we were little girls. George Washington had a son that looked like him, had red hair like him. Believe it or not.
Ford's mother, Venus, was a slave at Bushfield Plantation in Virginia, the home of George's brother, John Washington, and John's wife, Hannah.
Venus told her son that his father was George Washington, and she told him that there was no way that the Washingtons would claim him, but she wanted him to know who his father was.
The Ford family believes that Venus accompanied Hannah Washington on a trip to Mount Vernon. There, they say, Venus and Washington had a liaison, producing West Ford. By comparing the wills of Washington family members, the Mount Vernon historians place Ford's birth date between 1784 and 1785, but find no written evidence of George Washington and Venus ever having met.
He had his own personal diary, and so for most of his life, we have a daily record of where he was.
What's more, historians generally believe the statesman was sterile. However, it's apparent from the documents that West Ford did get special treatment from the Washington family. One impressive example is the last will and testament of Hannah, the wife of George's brother, John Washington.
It is my earnest wish and desire that this lad West may be as soon as possible inoculated for the smallpox, after which to be bound to a good tradesman until the age of 21 years, after which he is to be free the rest of his life.
According to the will of Bushrod Washington, the son of Hannah and John, West Ford was given 160 acres of land on the Mount Vernon plantation. A very unusual gesture for the time, Mount Vernon historians admit.
There's clearly special treatment that's accorded him.